that time once again for the Integrateness podcast with Jason and Jolene. I'm Jason. She's Jolene, that gal over there who you can't see, but she just raised her finger in acknowledgement. Jolene, how's your week been?
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you. Yeah. How about
How
yours?
much wine have you drank this week?
I don't do wine. I don't do
No?
wine. You know what though? You know what I was big on? It became my friend this summer. Gin.
Oh,
I
gin
don't
is good.
typically, yeah, I dove into gin this year and I've been quite enjoying that. And I don't typically drink during the week. I don't really drink much anymore. Except for like summertime. It's really associated with summertime for me and being out at the lake or in the sunshine, things like that. But my life is so busy. I cannot do that whole like drink a glass of wine and like cook dinner kind of thing, and I don't have much of a social life these days. So, yeah, it's fairly limited. Does that surprise people here? I mean, I am very open about the amount of cocktails I have enjoyed throughout my years, but I would say that it has slowed down more in these last, like, definitely since I've had kids, for sure. And then just through my own journey, which we'll talk a little bit about that, like the evolution of substances throughout our lives. How about you? How many cocktails have you had?
Oh, I think I average a couple a day if I broke it down. And I've talked about this a lot too, and I have no shame in putting even up on social media. I'm one of those. I like to have a couple drinks at night while watching a movie or TV and then winding down to go to bed. I used to be a party animal well into my 30s, like well into my 30s. And it wasn't unusual to take down, especially when I was a journalist. Journalists are notoriously hard drinkers, really, especially if you're a crime reporter. It becomes a coping mechanism, which I mean, we'll talk about dependence behavior here, but it would be a way to, because you'd be ramped up from working all day and having to meet all these deadlines. And then it was quite often the topics I was writing about were horrible and you saw dead bodies and you did stuff. So it was a really effective, at least at the time, way to come down off of that, especially at the end of the week. Like my work week ended on a Thursday, so that was my Friday. And in order to just reset myself, I'd watch a couple movies, and I don't know how many. Like, I'd start with like, rum and cokes and work it back to beer to end the night. And I don't know how many I'd take down in an evening then. So yeah, then I was a daily drinker, and it was not like light drinking. It was, quite serious alcohol consumption for sure, until that career ended, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I want people to start thinking about, like, as we're going to be tossing out a lot of info today and a lot of different scenarios and the spectrum of use. Like there is a massive continuum, a big spectrum of use, and like when that's, experimental use. And I used to do a lot of work. I did a bunch of training in substance use in the substance use field and stuff. So we used to go through all of the logistics of this, right? But I mean, you could look at your own life and think about experimental use. When did you first start? What was it? And what were your drugs of choice, that kind of thing, right? For me, it was always alcohol. I had like my hand in weed back in the day, and it was never really my thing. I just would get kind of paranoid on it. And then even in these like later years here, I've had a lot of clients talk about, using gummies to fall asleep, or different ways to use pot. And I tried the gummy thing not that long ago and was like, meh, still not my thing, right? But I was interested because that was when I was doing all my sleep meditation stuff, because I was like, I want to see, what does it do? And it just really fucked up the deep sleep cycle. I didn't really like what it impacted there. But for some people, that has become like a really great way to guarantee a good night's sleep and things like that. But when we look at the spectrum of use, when has it been quite frequent, and as a coping mechanism? For me, most of my alcohol use was very socially based. I didn't do a ton of it by myself. Like I said, I wasn't really the like have to have my glass of wine at night kind of thing. Probably back when I was socializing lots, maybe I was socializing every night, and I did, right? But like what things are it associated with? Like I used to be a smoker as well. So that was like another substance I relied on quite a bit back in the day, and different things like that. There was lots of different experimental type substances. And then now, there's so much discussion around things like microdosing, using psilocybin and mushrooms and things like that. And for me, I come from a substance use background. Like I saw people in the depths of their addiction. And I'll tell you, it's a bit of a buzzkill, because here I am, I remember I started in that field at 23, and we had these like annual party camping trips where, we would like camp on the beach with boats and stuff for like 6 days and just like drink morning to night kind of thing. But there was always like a mushroom night where a big group of my friends would do mushrooms one night, and I could not partake. Me and this one other friend just couldn't do it. And for me, it was because I was like, I work with like homeless psychotic people. Like I just can't do this. It's so morally conflicting. I'll probably just have a bad trip and waste my time here. Like I'll stick with the demon that I know, which is like all of my booze, right? So it was really interesting in how my career and witnessing people in the depths of that really shifted my perception of this like all or nothing of substance use in some ways too. And I had already gone through a lot of my experimental phases and knew like, ooh, I like that one too much. I better stay away from it. Right. And we're all one bad decision away from being that person. Right. I remember one of my colleagues back in the addictions field would always say that, like, he would have some of his schoolmates in his day programs, after losing everything in their lives. Right. And they're like, why are you on the other side of this? And he's like, hey, we're all one bad decision away, and we don't know when that is or who that is, right? We know so many people whose lives, with access to some substances lately, like fentanyl and things like that, they're just like big warm hugs to some of our abandonment and attachment type wounds in all of our relational damage, that those are like stealing people's lives. They are stealing fathers and mothers from families. I've lost quite a few friends in high school that I, had like the Instagram family pictures, and you're like, are you kidding? He's like addicted and living down on the like on East Hastings now, like things like that. It really is quite I don't want to say humbling. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but a bit of an eye opener in terms of like, none of us are truly protected from this, right? We never know.
No, you don't. And it takes one bad turn in life. Like I didn't even really start drinking. I never partied in high school. Like I just wasn't interested. My friends and I did other stuff.
Yeah, you'd have to hang out with people to do that, Jason, and you hated people.
And I hated people, and that's exactly right. So at least I had the group of people I knew that we didn't do anything dumb where someone would start getting into a fight, or I remember there's one incident at a party up in Batch where one of the guys got drunk, got mad, got in his car and drove it through the fire and through all the crowd of teenagers. You know what I mean? Like they're just that kind of stuff.
Part. That was the best part of those parties.
Not getting run over by a car though. Like, but once my father passed away, then yeah, I did. That's kind of when it started for me. I'd have the odd casual drink, but nothing until that happened. And so you can just see how certain life events will take you down a certain path, right? And then you take add in like a job where there's that kind of trauma or vicarious trauma on a regular basis, and it doesn't take much. But I realized early on that cocaine was awesome, and so I've done it once and never ever ever done it again, because that's just that to me. That would be I'd be done. I'd be broke. I'd be on the street. It would be over.
For sure. And that's really funny you say that. That was the one that I referenced where I was like, oh, I like that one too much. I better stay away from it. For sure. Yeah. We always talk about going from like the basement to the penthouse in 20 seconds, right? I mean, that's, that's some of the impact. And again, like a lot of those drugs are like even more so nowadays, right? Once you add crystal meth onto the mix, when that became kind of a big drug of choice because you went from the basement to the penthouse in a blink of an eye, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. So recognizing when we don't have enough protective factors in our lives, right? But this is where it becomes a bit of an interesting juggle, because like societally wise, we have really normalized that whole like moms need wine and all of that. Just like you opened with, how much wine did you drink this week, right? We've really normalized that, and there are so many women that I work with, and we can look around and like we got all these closet drinkers like desperately coping and then feeling like shit the next day, and then in this cycle, right, of chaos. Because again, and I say moms because there is a lot of this like mental demand and overstimulation and needing to like totally numb out at the end of a night, just to kind of manage and cope. But it's so normalized and glamorized even, right? Like societally, we've really kind of glamorized that. So now, I really love when people are speaking out about sobriety and about what it's been like. There's quite a few public figures that you'll see that are talking a bit more about sobriety. I can think of some people in town that are in some public positions that are like, yeah, we just like stopped drinking for a year, and this is how our relationship changed. This is how my life has changed. My health has changed. Like we didn't do it because it was problematic, but we were curious enough that we like did it to see, and sometimes it's really great to do it that way, because when we have to commit to abstinence for the rest of our life, that's a crapshoot. Like that's really hard to do. But if it's like just like when people do elimination diets and, oh, I'm going to cut out, like I'm going to do my best to cut out sugar. I'm going to do my best to cut out carbs for a little while until I get things on track. Doing the same thing with alcohol. We talk about sober September. We talk about New Year's resolutions in January, things like that. And it is a really great time to get back and reflect, like, why do I grab for this? In what capacity does my life allow for that? Like, am I hiding this from people? All of a sudden we get into some of these kinds of things where we're like, oh, I'll have a drink before my partner gets home. I've talked to some people who are like, that's when I realized it was getting bad, because I was hiding my first couple drinks so that they wouldn't judge how many I had had. Things like that. We're all like very accountable for our actions. We're very aware of them, right? So sometimes it's a good time to just kind of reflect on that. And, what purpose do we use it for? Is it socially? Is it, and do we look for more social situations so we can justify the drink and things like that, right? It's very interesting once we start looking at the why, and then how is it impacting you. So again, when people tell me they use alcohol for sleep, it always makes me curious about what the rest of their sleep looks like in the course of their sleep, because it might help you fall asleep by getting you into that relaxed state. Go back and listen to our sleep podcast episode if you're interested in all of those pieces. But it might get your body into a relaxed state initially, but what happens is our body's always in this state of equilibrium. So when the depressant, which is the central nervous system effect of alcohol, it's a depressant, when that enters our system, our body has like this boomerang response, which is almost like releasing like an adrenaline to counter that. So it brings us back to a state of balance. But that response lasts longer time frame wise than the depressant response. So this is called the rebound effect. So let's say the depressant effect of the alcohol lasts for 2 hours. The rebound effect, which is that like revved up response that your body gives, that lasts for 4 hours. At the 2 hour mark, you're no longer going to be sedated, but you're going to have this 2 hours left over of this revved up response in your body, which is often why people, for myself, if I have like 6 or more, I'm okay for the night because I have enough of the depressant effect in there. But if I have 3 drinks, I'm sure there's an insulin spike there around sugars and stuff, but essentially that depressant effect, I wake up around 1:30 or 2 and I'm wired, because I just didn't I didn't knock out good enough, right? And I just have this like really broken sleep from that 1 or 2 o'clock point on, right? So usually when I tell people that, they're like, oh, that happens to me. And it's when they'll have a couple of glasses, right? So yeah, just something to think about there in terms of like, how is this impacting things for myself? And then again, a lot of people, like when you think about the caloric intake and when people are trying to be careful around their nutrition and trying to lose weight, which we're always trying to do in this society, it's like, yeah, you know what? That's like, you're looking at like 150 calories a drink typically, right?
If yeah, really paid attention to especially the caloric intake, as I've gotten older. So when I have, any booze at night, it's like I have a whiskey, which is one of the lowest calorie intakes you can have and low sugar levels.
Whiskey. What's your choice brand?
I have a whole bunch I like. So I have that.
It's like an art form, right? Like
it is. It's fun. It's almost like you're collecting it, because you sample different kinds, you find the ones you like, you try new ones. There's so many different varieties now. And then for beer, all I drink is actually Molson Ultra, which is 70 carbs or calories and only 3% alcohol per volume. So if you have 2 of those, it's the equivalent really of 1 beer, regular beer.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a waste.
I know, but it's what works, right? Because if I have the other stuff, then I get hit harder by I wake up feeling crappy. Even if I only have like a couple regular beer, I'm screwed.
I know.
If I go to like a brew pub and have that beer, like one of those beers, the alcohol content, and it's like my wife's got to drive, because I'm like, I'm done. Done.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It depends on like how you're using it. So I say it's kind of a waste, because it's like, what are you using it for? So I remember when I had kids and I would have room for like kind of 1 drink in my day, and it would be that afternoon, like it's sunny out, it's like 2 to 3 o'clock. I can like maybe sit and enjoy a drink. I decided to go for like a good craft beer, because I'd get a better buzz for 1 drink. Yeah. And it tasted good. And I actually like to try the different flavors, and it allowed me. However, if I was like going out with friends or whatever, it'd probably be like a 12-pack of bud or something, because it was more for like a different purpose at that point, right? Yeah, so it's super interesting, how you're utilizing it, and the difference between what effect do you want, right? Like when you drink whiskey, it's different than when you're drinking beer.
Yeah, and I do it for the sheer, like, now. I mean, I'm sure there's a bit of a dependency for having it at night, but for the sheer enjoyment, I like the taste of it. I
Hmm.
enjoy it. Like, it's, if they suddenly decided they were not going to make booze with alcohol in it, and which alters the taste, I probably would just quit altogether. Because it's like this to me, then it's a pointless exercise. I like the taste of it. I don't even drink enough where I'm feeling even tipsy.
Yeah, conditioned responses too, right? So we think about Pavlov's dogs when he would ring the bell and they'd salivate because they knew food was coming. You do enough of that. For you, it's an associated with an experience. For you, it's an experience because you go outside, you have like a cigar and stuff. Do you like
Yeah,
sit in your face usually? Yeah. So you've got that really great association. For people at home, like think about that. What are your associations? Is there a certain thing that you get to do? Is it because your kids have gone to bed, or is it because your wife's no longer nagging at you? Is it because you go into like your space and you're gonna, watch a hockey game or whatever that looks like for you, or you get to go outside and have a smoke, whatever. There's other associations we have, and that's where when we, like, back when I used to do all my substance use training and stuff, we would talk about like how drugs can have a bigger effect when we have an anticipatory response and the environmental conditions that suit that. So if you drop acid and go to a Thanksgiving dinner at grandma's, it's not going to be nearly as trippy as if you drop acid and go to like a rave or something, or like a party somewhere. So again, we have these responses in our environment that can accentuate the effects of the substance, right? So there's a way that like physiologically that even impacts you too in this anticipatory sense. So we have all of these things we anchor into at the end of a week. I was a regular smoker back when I smoked, and it was like morning till night, did not matter what time of day it was. I had the same craving for the same cigarettes all the time, right? One of my friends, she could go all week, not smoke anything, and then on weekends would blast through like 3 packs. But if you took that weekend away from her, she would have a really hard time. But she was able to withhold the 5 days in between as long as she knew that that weekend was coming up, and we'd have drinks in whatever capacity and she'd smoke. So there was always this anticipatory response. So think about that. Like, is it that I make it through the day? Is it that I wait until I have book club on Wednesday nights and then that's where I'm anticipating it? That's great. Wonderful. What happens if book club isn't there? Are you stressing a little bit? Are you more irritable? Where do you not have that outlet now? Just look at some of those mechanisms. Do you sit at home and like eat a bag of chips instead? Think about some of those things, because sometimes people are like, I didn't realize it was offering me what it was offering me because I just wasn't aware of it till it was not there, kind of thing.
I'm still trying to figure out who would drop acid and go to Thanksgiving dinner at grandma's. That to me is a fascinating concept. I would love to meet that
No,
human being and talk to them about why, like, of all the places, like,
again, that would be a bit of a waste.
it would, that would be a bit of a waste. Like, come on, go somewhere, you're like doing ecstasy and sitting in the woods by yourself. Like, this is the
Right?
best tree I've ever met. Anyways.
Well, when we're grounding and we're reconnecting with self, and this is where a lot of like mushrooms have made a big comeback in terms of healing and looking at trauma healing and modalities and things like that. Actually, they're a really cool episode if people want to check it out and kind of get like the lowdown on a bit of that. Gwyneth Paltrow has this series called Goop, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but I sometimes force myself to, just to get out of my head a bit. And I started watching that Goop series of hers, and I think it was the first or second episode. One of them was the Wim Hof method around cold therapy. That's really great. And they're 20-minute episodes where she actually sends her staff to experience these things, and then they report back and they do like a show around it. And it's all around health and wellness and just like living a better life kind of thing. So the one that they did around trauma healing, I feel like they went somewhere like Bali or something, and they had like guided trauma healing sessions using psilocybin as the conduit for that. And it was really cool to watch. And then they talk about the science of it, right? So they talk about why and what it does and how they support the individual. And then the people who went through the experience talk about their experience after. So that's like a 20-minute episode if people are interested in kind of checking that out and getting a bit of the lowdown around some of that. But that's where some of that has come in, right? Like I work with some couples who have used it to increase intimacy in their relationship, right? When they're each doing their own work, and then they're trying to just build a bigger sense of trust and understanding and openness and intimacy with each other. So sometimes they'll do a bit of like a mushroom ceremony and create emotional and physical intimacy opportunities there where they just are a little less inhibited, or maybe holding some of the grudges or the old patterns that they used to hold, and it allows them kind of a new space to do that. So it's been very interesting to kind of do a bit of my own research, but then also witness other people and hear their stories about how they're utilizing that. Because especially in the trauma field, people are very experimental and curious and open on that end of things, way more I have found than like seeking out psychotropics like antidepressants and things like that. People are very eager to try alternative methods and kind of start doing their own research that way. So yeah, it's been very interesting to witness that. And there's certain things like some substances are not addictive, right? So psilocybin and the part of the brain that impacts is not addictive and habit forming in the physical dependency sense. Whereas something like cocaine is, because it interacts with dopamine, which is one of our reward neurotransmitters. Same thing with alcohol. Again, that's a depressant, and stimulants like coffee, cigarettes, cocaine, those kinds of things are uppers, right? So this is how it impacts your nervous system. But and other things you want to be careful about is like if you're a drinker and you're on sleeping pills, those are like deadly combos, right? That's like the no of everything, right? That's where like 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 = 4. They really enhance the effects because it's suppressing your nervous system, which is your heart rate, your breathing, all of those things, right? So yeah, thinking about some of that stuff, like how habit forming, dependent forming is the substance that I'm using, right? And weed kind of fits into an interesting category and all of that because it's not necessarily habit forming. However, we've messed with the composition of weed so much over the years. It's not like what we used to have in the 60s. So we had higher CBD and lower THC. THC is a psychedelic property in weed. We had much lower THC levels, excuse me, in the 60s. And now that we can like hybrid and do all of this, we can mess around with that so much. That's why we're getting a lot of psychotic responses when people have too high of THC, because that naturally brings down the CBD, which is cannabinoids. And the cannabinoids in the plant are the ones that have the calming effect. So that's why there's such a difference between some of the weed that we see now that's way more potent in getting people higher, but also getting people more paranoid, anxious, and psychotic. Way different than our like free flowing, yeah, live in the 60s, love, rock and roll, all of that, right? Because we've totally messed with the principles of the plant. So I tell people if you're using pot of any sorts, like pay attention to what your CBD and THC levels are, because that's going to change how it's impacting you. And you might want to play around with that THC level. And a lot of people who use it for like pain and things like that, I'm like, let's be honest with ourselves. If you're using that high of THC and that often, you're getting high. This is not a pain management issue anymore. Like there is a difference between managing pain and coping and getting high. And let's talk about the benefit of getting high and escaping life right now. So, there's some of those kinds of things, being really honest with yourself about the amount that you're using, the frequency, the consistency, all of those things, right? Just want to get you self-aware, because I think sometimes just the more aware we are of it, the more accountable we are when we go to pour that drink, to smoke that joint. And we can just have a way better understanding of like, where is this actually fitting in and influencing my life?
Especially now that like so much of it is socially acceptable now. You know what I mean? And that just makes it, I think harder for people sometimes to manage, because it's like, oh wow, it's no longer this thing I have to hide. I can do it and everything's fine with it. And they got stores to go buy pot and all this stuff. I think it creates a problem for people who before maybe were more leery of using, or like would hide their use, which I mean, it's good you're not hiding it, but then if you're being open, you're not hiding it and you're not managing what you're doing.
Honestly, and I know so many people who have actually given up alcohol, like I'm 40, so in that like 35 to 45 range, I know a lot of people who have given up alcohol, and it's like socially awkward. People are like, what do you mean you don't want to drink? And they're like, I don't drink. Why?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, for me, like a big reason why I don't drink on a regular basis, and I'll drink for specific reasons or socializing purposes, or like I said, it's very much associated to like summertime in the lake for me. I feel disconnected. I'm a really spiritual person. I have a lot of connection energetic wise, and I go totally dull. I feel it's like someone's turned the light switch off. So if I drink too much, I lose my connection. I lose that sense. So I choose not to, because I prefer this feeling to that feeling, that dull feeling. Yeah.
Interesting stuff, and an interesting conversation once again on our show. Leave us your thoughts and comments on like Instagram at our Instagram page, or even here on the app of whichever of choosing that you're listening to us on. We're on many different platforms right now. And Jolene and I are going to be back next week with a whole new topic to discuss. We're going to talk about the weather.
Oh, we are. Yeah, we are.
Like literally the weather,
Yeah,
and how that
until
affects how you
then.
feel.
Yeah. Cheers, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers. Until then, I'm Jason,
I'm Jolene.
and we'll be back again next week.